Noticed in my most recent videos that I've gotten a lot of new subscribers that are new to the language learning world, in particular Spanish. And I'm noticing that a lot of them are leaving comments like, man, you really inspired me to start learning Spanish, and I'm looking forward to learning Spanish. And so my channel, along with being instructional, has also turned into a motivational tool, and that's a good thing. Ironically though, this video is going to be the exact opposite of that, in that this video is going to describe when I think that it is okay to quit learning a language. Now, obviously I speak Spanish, and so I'm referring to that in particular, and I'm just going to use my experience to contrast with maybe some people that have the desire to quit, so that you can see when it might be an indication of you really needing to quit. But either way, in general, this list that I have here, I think objectively are some things that could let you know that maybe learning another language is not for you. I know this, again, because I've experienced what learning Spanish was like, and I've experienced what learning Swahili was like, because again, guys, unfortunately, I'm not learning Swahili anymore, and I'll explain why later in the end of the video. I know I'm flip-flopping, I know. This is a part of just life, and this is part of why I don't like to share so much on the internet, because if I never said I was learning it, I could have just quit in peace. But either way, I'll get to that at the end of the video. So long story short, the intent with this video is to tell you all, I think I have 4 or 5 reasons why you maybe should quit learning another language. And so let's get into those now. So in my opinion, the first sign that you should quit learning a language is that you don't like it. Like, you genuinely don't like it. And that's just like a point blank period point there. And what do I mean by you don't like it? From the first day when I started learning Spanish, listening to those audio lessons, I would get these kind of dopamine hits when I would be able to say something. It was exciting learning that coconut is coco, or learning that come here is ven aquí. Like, that was exciting to me. The same excitement feeling that you get in your brain when you eat sugar, or when you do something pleasurable, that same feeling is what I felt learning Spanish, and it's still what I feel in the instances now when I learn something new, or when I hear something cool, or a phrase that I hear in Spanish that I haven't maybe heard for a long time. It's like, wow, this language is just beautiful. I get that same feeling. If you don't get that feeling, if learning Spanish is just like blah, like whatever, like if you don't have any kind of excitement, that is an indication that maybe learning that language in particular isn't for you, or maybe in general learning languages isn't for you, and that is okay. I lived 28 years, I'm 28 now. I lived 25 years that I would objectively say was a happy, healthy life, being a monolingual person. And so being bilingual is not the key to happiness, it's not the key to personal growth, it's just a hobby, right? And so again, my point here is, if you don't like that feeling, you don't like it, if you don't figure out that, I don't know, Jumatatu means Monday in Swahili, if that's not fun to you, and again, that's not fun to me anymore in Swahili, unfortunately. If that's not fun to you, that's a sign that maybe this isn't for you. Maybe learning another language isn't for you. Maybe learning the language in particular that you're learning isn't for you. And the other points will kind of mix in with that, so I can add some context here, because it's not just the singular point. So again, number one, if you don't like it, if you don't get some rush of excitement being able to say something, some rush of excitement from seeing your progress or growth, it may not be for you. Another reason that has impacted me personally right now, that maybe another sign rather that you maybe shouldn't be learning Spanish or learning another language in general, is literally if you do not have the time. Now, having time is subjective, right? People say we don't have time to work out. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to call my family. I don't have time to do this. When we say that, we're just basically saying it's not a priority in our life. And so that when I make this point, I'm making the same point. If because of your other time obligations, here's when the animals or the bugs start to eat me, and the planes come at the same time, give me 30 seconds. Yeah, so what I was saying is, if you have other priorities in your life, other pursuits that subjectively, right choice of words, subjectively to you, right, are more important than being able to speak another language, you should prioritize those other things, right? I'm imagining when I started learning Spanish at 25, if I had kids, if I just had other responsibilities that would have taken an hour that excuse me, if I had other responsibilities, that would have replaced that 1 hour of free time that I had during the process of me learning Spanish. If I had to help my kid with homework, or take my kid to an event, or go to my kid's soccer or basketball game, like, I would prioritize that for sure over learning Spanish. You know what I mean? I just would have. And so if your life circumstance, again, you have to be the judge of that, right? You have to judge where learning Spanish or learning any language lines up on your priority list. And again, I've done this same exercise with learning Swahili, hence why I'm stopping right now. It's not a priority for me, and I'll get into that again later. I'm repeating myself, but if it's not to you personally, it is okay to not learn another language. If you genuinely don't have the time, that's okay. Now, if you have the time and you're just making an excuse, that's not okay. Especially if you do get the feeling of like, I enjoy this, or if you have some kind of intrinsic or even extrinsic motivation that would make learning Spanish or speaking Spanish eventually be worth the time investment, then I'd say that's different. That's just a lack of motivation. That can be a lack of discipline. And I'm talking about different things here. I'm not using this, please guys, I'm rambling a little bit, but please don't use this video as justification for not being disciplined, or not being motivated, or not being a hard worker. You know what I mean? Like, or for procrastination. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying legitimate cases where you have 30 minutes in a day free to spend with your kid, or to garden, or if you like that, or to, I don't know, I used to play guitar, or to practice an instrument, or if you make beats, or if you program and you're trying to learn that on the side. Like, it's too much to try to juggle. So yeah, this is a 2-minute clip at this point. I think you guys get the point. If you don't have the time, legitimately, stop learning another language. So another reason why you may want to quit learning a language is if you're learning a language that you consider useless or not very useful in your geographic region. I could be ignorant here, but I'm imagining that the frequency at which one hears Spanish in New Delhi in India is not very common. I'm not trying to discourage anybody who lives in New Delhi in India, excuse me. That's a Freudian slip there, because the Prime Minister of England is from India, or his family's from India. But either way, I'm not trying to discourage somebody who lives in that region to not learn Spanish. I'm just saying, based on the context, it's not as useful there. You know what I mean? Same for here. Me learning Arabic in the suburbs of Atlanta is not really a pressing deal. Like, sure, I hear Arabic every now and then, but it's not common. I can go to I'll just list, yesterday, I'm in Norcross, I hear Spanish. In McDonough the other day, I hear Spanish. These are little suburbs of Atlanta, all around the city. I'm going to Piedmont Park. Well, I went to Piedmont Park last weekend, hearing Spanish all around. I was on Memorial Drive. I was in Alpharetta. I'm hearing Spanish all the time. And so, based on the context, the geographical context, obviously, I'm not going to use all these fancy words. I live in a country where Spanish is spoken predominantly. And so, it makes sense. If you live somewhere where you don't hear the language that you're learning, it can definitely affect your motivation. Me learning Spanish from the very first day of me learning how to say, yo soy Miguel, yo soy Michael, I was able to leave my home, go 5 minutes down the road, see una carniceria, right? A butcher shop, un mercado de mariscos, a seafood market here in Atlanta, and these are all Hispanic owned. I can see stuff like that. I can hear the language. If you can't do that, and your only hope at using the language is a one-off trip once every 4 years, that's tough to keep you motivated. And it was tough to keep me motivated with Swahili. So after this, I'm going to go over how this impacts me personally. But if it doesn't seem like the language is useful or frequently used where you are, or you don't have a long-term plan for using it, it can be very discouraging. And if you contrast that with the amount of work and time that you need to learn the language, it needs to kind of consume your life. Like, especially if you're a working adult, it kind of needs to consume your life for like a year and a half until you get to a decent level. And so consuming your life with something for a year and a half, almost 2 years, that you are not even going to use often is very, I don't even know if it makes sense logically. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make logical sense if your time is limited. So yeah, the next reason that you may want to consider quitting learning a language is if you do not feel connected to the culture. Now, people can say that these two things are not interrelated, but they definitely are. If you start learning a language and you learn about the culture, the cultural norms, the behaviors, the traditions, the ideologies of the people group that speak the language that you're learning, and you find that they're not, like these things that you're discovering are not interesting to you, they're not appealing to you. If you can't find music, if you can't find food, if you can't find things that just attract you to a specific culture, you're not gonna wanna continue engaging with the culture because, again, a major part of learning a language is learning about the culture. And so I don't wanna repeat myself too much here. I think that's a pretty obvious point. So again, if you start learning a language and you're like, this doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't appeal to me. It just doesn't. You need to stop learning that language because you need that cultural aspect to really understand and be motivated to spend the time to engage with the language. And the final reason why you should possibly consider quitting learning a language is if you don't see that language being a part of your life long term. I view learning a language as a time investment. So yeah, you take 2 to 3 years to, buckle down and consume your life with the language. But after you've learned it, you have it in your bag for the rest of your life, and you can pull it out and use it at any point for the rest of your life. This applies to Spanish. I like where I live in Atlanta, Metro Atlanta. I think Atlanta, with its problems and with its good and bad, I think it's one of the best cities for me personally in the U.S. And I like living in the United States. So, long story short, with my long-term life plan, having Spanish in my bag is purely an asset. Like I mentioned before, I go everywhere and I hear Spanish. I can pull it out whenever I need to. It helps me with work. It helps me in a lot of different things here. And so long term, in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, God willing, 80s, God willing, 90s, God willing, hundreds. We don't know. I take care of myself. With all of those years that we're talking about, almost 60 years, oh, that's more than that. I'm 20 something now. Almost 30, almost 70 years of time, hopefully, I'll have Spanish in my bag and I'll be able to use it here. If I were to learn, again, an obscure language in a specific region of a part of the world that is not common based on my long-term life plan, that investment really doesn't pay off. Again, let's think back. 3 years of me learning Spanish is when I'd really say I dominated it. 3 years of learning Spanish translates to 70 years of being able to use it in my daily life based on my personal life plan. If I take 3 years and learn another language that maybe is not as common here, and in the future I take 2 trips to that country, 3 years of time invested for 2, maybe at most 1 month long trips. So 3 years invested to be able to use the language for 2 months doesn't make logical sense, okay? So hopefully you guys see what I'm saying. If the language does not fall in line with your long-term plan, quit. You've got, unless language learning is just an inherent hobby of yours, and even if that's the case, if learning language is your number one priority, your number one hobby in life, okay? And in that case, go for it. Do whatever you want, que lo hagas. But if not, it just doesn't make sense logically. And so with all that said, I want to go over really quick why I'm quitting Swahili again. Lo siento, I'm quitting Swahili again. And it piggybacks off of the points that I made in this video. So long story short, I recently, as I mentioned, have been learning Swahili. Been at it again for about a month. And I'm noticing that I'm learning even faster. I'm learning Swahili even faster than I am Spanish. Lunes, Jumatatu, martes, Jumanne, miércoles, Jumatano, jueves, Alhamisi, viernes, y Juma, sábado, Jumamosi, Dio, domingo, Jumapili, cierto, se acabó todos los días, listo, vamos pues. But I am noticing that, as it should be, right? I don't know why I expected anything other than this. as it should be, it's consuming my life. It's consuming my time. When I was learning my first language, Spanish, sure, that was fine. Again, we were on lockdown when I first started learning Spanish, so that wasn't a problem. I really was lucky and blessed in that sense that, and I'm not saying COVID was a good thing, I'm just saying as a result of the global circumstance, I was locked in my house and I had nothing else to do, you know what I mean, besides study Spanish for at least a year. And then that got me to the point where I could kind of, with limited time, maintain. But I just have other hobbies in my life, guys, other hobbies that take my time, other interests, other areas of my life that I'm trying to improve in. I'm trying to just develop more. And so the language learning element of my life, that is an all-consuming thing, is just not priority right now, especially when we consider that in the last 30 days, I've seen and spoken with thousands of Spanish speakers here in Metro Atlanta, and I've seen one Kenyan. And even when I talked to him and I said, "Una toca wapi," he's like, "Kenya." Like, he was kind of like, "I don't feel like talking to you, man." Again, his personal, that experience with him alone is not representative of all Kenyans. I'm just saying it's not a good use of my time right now to learn an entirely new language, especially when I probably am going to be in Kenya at max 2 to 3 times in my life right now, based on the life plan that I have for my life right now. Even so much so that I don't even think Kenya is the first country that I'd like to visit in Africa. Just a side note, I did my DNA results, at least on my mom's side. There's like the biggest percentage is like 23% Nigerian, I think, and like 21% from Mali. So those would be countries that I want to visit even before Kenya. I do want to go to Kenya though, but either way, even then in Kenya, you don't need to speak Swahili to understand. So it's just like, right now, do I want to invest the time? So I'm saying all this to say this analyzation, I guess you could say, this process of analyzing whether or not learning a language is a good use of your time is not something that you only have to do, obviously, with Swahili. You could even do it with Spanish. Spanish may not be something that you need to invest your time in. If you have other priorities, it may not be. You know what I mean? I would say if you live in the United States or in England or anywhere where you have Spanish speakers migrating to your country, or you live near Spanish speaking countries, it's a great investment, I think, personally, objectively. But you may not view it you may not view it that way once you analyze it. And so with all that said, I just wanted to give you all this video. If some of you are considering quitting learning Spanish, I'm not saying you should, but if you find that all of these things apply to you, like you don't get excited when you're learning new things, you might live in Montana and you don't see Spanish speakers and you don't plan on leaving Montana ever, you know what I mean? If that's your situation, it may, unless you're just doing it for fun or for mental exercise, you may want to quit, and it's no problem. Like, you can live a healthy, happy, fulfilling life without being bilingual. I'm happy. Estoy muy feliz que yo aprendí español porque me ha servido demasiado. Mi vida es mucho más rica por el hecho de que lo hablo, pero no sé qué quieres hacer. Entonces, gracias por ver este video. Como siempre, les digo, les aprecio mucho, los aprecio mucho, y que el video te haya gustado y ayudado. Chao.